welcome to the tutorial for DIY number 2. This is a spy movie opening title sequence, a TV spy show opening title sequence, and let's watch what we're going to make. Okay, pretty simple. Pretty simple concept. Let's see, let's leave that up so we can go back to it if necessary. And I have already taken the liberty of importing the audio files. You have had two audio files and a movie supplied that you can download as DIY source files on Learning Suite. And those are Italian guitar mandolin.aif, ominousmusic.aif, and Venice Rialto Bridge.mp4 is the movie that we need to use at the end. So let's get right into it. This is a text-based, mostly text-based intro, so let's grab our type tool and let's click somewhere close to the middle. And this is going to be starring Kiefer Sutherland. Hit enter there to seal that. And if I want to know exactly where the center of my screen is in After Effects, I like to use the title safe zones, which you can find under here with this button, or you can simply press the quotes key, the apostrophe, or the quotes key. That toggles it on and off. And the reason I like to use it is because it has a crosshair right in the center of my screen. If I zoom in here, hitting the greater than key, greater than less than zooms in the composition window. And I can position it exactly where I want to, because the crosshairs of my type and the crosshairs of the title safe let me know where I'm at. So I can turn that off, and then I'm going to hit Option / or Option ? To get my composition window to fit exactly in my composition to fit in my composition window, up to 100%. And as you can see, that is exactly 100%. So that looks pretty good. Let's see, the color we're looking at here is, it looks like if you're looking at hex, it's 00C6DF, or if you're RGB, it's 0198223. Okay, if you want to follow along, exactly. If you just want to eyeball it, that's fine too. I want you guys to get as close as you can. All right, now as you can see, when I create a text layer in After Effects, it fills the whole entire comp length and starts at 0, which is not exactly what we want. I think each of our text layers needs to be about 3 seconds long, so I'm going to jump to 3 seconds on my timeline, and I'm going to hit Option right bracket to trim that. I also don't want Kiefer to come up right away, so I'm going to slide him over to start at about, I don't know, 1 second. Okay, now if we take a look at our example, Kiefer's name, is blurry and fades in, so we've got pretty much 0% opacity and we've got a blurry fade in happening, and it's a very smooth sort of pass over the text. Let's flip down our text layer twirly here, and I know we're going to need opacity, so right here by the text twirly, the animate drop down, I will click opacity. That gives me animator 1, range selector 1, and then shows me the text property that I'm going to animate. I know that we're going to need blur as well, and since I've already added one animator with opacity, I need to add another property, which is going to be blur. I could have done it in the opposite way. I could have at first animated blur and then added opacity. Doesn't really matter the order. What does matter is that if you're adding two properties to a text wipe on, that you will need to have them both under the same animator. So get used to the difference between animate and add. Okay, I happen to know that the amount of blur we're going to apply to this text is 50 pixels. 50 by 50 pixels, that's pretty blurry. And I happen to know that it's going to fade in from 0% opacity, so let's type in 0 right there. And if you're familiar with range selectors, you know that the range selector acts as a giant magnifying glass that holds an effect. And as you can see here, well, let's flip down range selector. So how do range selectors work? Using the magnifying glass metaphor, the start property is the left edge of the magnifying glass. You can see as I drag here, it peels off the effect. Okay, and the end property is the right side. Well, that looks a little bit better, doesn't it? Okay. And offset means that the whole thing moves at it maintains its current width, which is pretty much the width of the entire text layer, but it just moves, if you move it to the left into the negative values, it slides it off completely to the left, and as we get to 0, that means it's right on top of the letters, and if we keep going into positive values, it slides it off to the right side. And you can't tell that it's the same width, but it is. You just have to trust me on that one. So I'm going to type back in 0 under my offset, and I will give you the hint that we are going to use offset here rather than start and end. Let's see. Okay, let's go ahead and at 1 second, let's lay down a keyframe for offset. Now, okay, as you can see, if we scrub all the way over to -100, it reveals the text, and then actually if we scrub up to 0 or a positive value, it's going to actually erase the text. What we kind of want is this, right? We kind of want that to happen, but there's one important thing we need to do to get the smoothness to appear correct, and that is to flip down the advanced twirly. I already have it open. And under shape, we don't want square, we don't want a linear wipe here. We want to ramp up, which is a very smooth, and very nice looking transition here. So as you can see, if we've already got an offset keyframe. If we start off at -100%, and then let's see, how long is this going to take to wipe on? Should we say 1 second? And then we drag up our offset value past 0 all the way up to 100%, positive 100%. Then if I scrub through this, that gives me a very smooth, sort of blurry, very cinematic transition on for this line of text. Now let me take a look at my answer key just to peek at how long. Yeah, that's about 1 second. All right. So our text layer is going to take 1 second to wipe on, and then it needs to somehow get off. We're not going to wipe it off using the same technique though. We are going to use just a simple fade off. So that means simply opacity. Now what I want to do is go to the end of my layer, so I'm going to hit O for out point, and I know that I'm going to need an opacity keyframe at the very end, so I'm going to hit Option T. Now it's very important for you to realize that Option T, which is one of the basic properties of a layer under Transform, under any After Effects layer, is different than the opacity text effect that I applied. See how they're in different places here? Opacity, to get this to wipe on, is different than the opacity for the entire layer, which is under Transform. Now to just reduce confusion here, I'm going to only show the properties that have keyframes associated with them, so I'm going to hit the letter U on my keyboard. That only shows offset and layer-based opacity. So we have a layer-based opacity keyframe at the very end. I want this to take about 10, maybe 20 frames to fade out. Let's just do 10, shall we? So from the end of my layer, I'm going to hit Command-Shift left arrow to jump back 10 frames. I'm going to add an opacity keyframe, which happens to be 100%. I know that I want it to fade out, so I'm going to jump to the end keyframe using my navigational arrows, and then I'm going to type in 0. Okay, so far we have a layer that fades in beautifully, stays there for a couple seconds, and then fades out. Ready for our next title to come on. Okay, about not quite a second until the next name comes on. And who was the next name? Tilda Swinton. Excellent actress, usually plays ice queens or weird elfin characters, androgynous elf-like characters. One of my favorite actresses, actually. All right, now there's a couple ways we could do this. Since her name is going to present itself on screen in a very similar way to Kiefer Sutherland, I could actually just duplicate this layer, change the text, and then change a few other parameters. So let's do that. Command D is going to duplicate. Let's scoot that, not quite a full second later in time. Now let's jump to the beginning, and let's flip this down so we can see, actually let's just hit U so we can see those keyframes for now. And in After Effects, if you want to change the text, what the text says, you can double-click the T icon on the layer. You could go up here as well and double-click it. But I like to, from the timeline, double-click the T, and it highlights and allows me to write over. Tilda Swinton, I believe that is how it's spelled. Hit Enter. All right. The advantage of duplicating is that it stays in the exact same place, which is nice. Don't have to realign things. Okay, now if we go back to our example, you will notice that Tilda Swinton's name actually presents itself in the opposite direction. So how are we going to do that? If we take a look at what we did for Kiefer, you remember that, let's see, go down to advanced, we had ramp up. Could we logically say, okay, if Tilda's going in the opposite direction, could we ramp down? Let's try changing Tilda Swinton's intro to ramp down. So let's flip down her advanced twirly. Let's give ourselves a little bit more timeline to look at. And let's change hers to ramp down. Okay, let's see what just changing that does for us. Okay, it actually does the opposite of what we want. She starts off at full opacity and we slowly fade her out. That is not what we want. So how are we going to change that? Well, we need to sort of reverse what we did with the offset because that controls how things wipe on. So with Kiefer's offset, we started off at a -100 and went up to a +100. Could we simply just reverse that and go from 100 to -100? We certainly could. The easiest way to do that would be to just swap these two keyframes in their current positions in time. So let's right-click or control-click on those keyframes with them both selected and go to Keyframe Assistant, Time Reverse Keyframes. So now we can see that the first keyframe says 100, +100, and the second one says -100. Again, that was with my keyframe selected, right-click or control-click, Keyframe Assistant, Time Reverse Keyframes. Let's see what that looks like. Let's scrub our timeline here, our current time indicator. There we go. That's exactly what we want. It wipes on from right to left. And we still have that fade off that we made from Kiefer. All right, let's hit U. Let's hit U. That way we can preserve our timeline space. By the way, I forgot at the very beginning to talk about the typeface. I'm using a typeface called Oxide Solid, which you probably do not have on your computer. I paid for this. I used it in a client project a couple of years ago, so I actually own this. If you're looking for a substitute for Oxide Solid, something that gets fairly close, as you can see, it's kind of squarish, you could go for Bank Gothic or another free font that I found called Orbitron, which is on the League of Movable Type. Orbitron looks like, where's my font book? Orbitron looks a little bit like this. It's got bold, monoline, squarish letter forms. So Orbitron bold, Orbitron black could work for you if you don't have Oxide. I do not recommend you go out and steal Oxide from anywhere. So Orbitron or maybe Bank Gothic if you have either of those. Orbitron is free though, for you to download on the League of Movable Type. Let's see, I was meant to leave that website up for you. League of Movable Type is at theleagueofmovabletype.com. There it is. There's Orbitron. Okay. Download for free. Back to After Effects. So far we've got Kiefer, we've got Tilda Swinton, and next is where we're going to put the name card for our finest actor or actress, I'm not sure, Grumpy Cat. So I'm going to duplicate Kiefer's again, because if we go back to our example, you might have noticed Grumpy Cat wipes on screen the exact same way as Kiefer. So I'm going to duplicate Kiefer, I'm going to slide him down here. I would like to drag him up to the top. I think Grumpy Cat's a girl? I don't know. I might call Grumpy Cat a boy. I might refer to Grumpy Cat as him just because I'm so used to thinking of him as a boy. It seems like I read that it was a girl. Okay, let's double click on the T icon on Kiefer. Yeah, let's scrub forward a little bit in time so we can actually read it. Double click the T, Grumpy Cat. Return to seal, and everything is already done for us. All the animation's already there. Let's select it and hit U so it will reveal all of the keyframes. Perfect. All right, what do we have next? After our 3 actors, we have a created by. Now this movie we're making is an Adam Sandler joint, so you know it's guaranteed to be good. Let's start off with let's just type the word Adam Sandler in Oxide. 72 point with 20 points of tracking. Hit enter. Turn on our title safe guides here so we can see where this middle is, and I'm going to put the baseline of the type down on the exact center of the screen so we have optical centering. Turn that off with quote key. All right, actually we need a second line, don't we? We need, let me just use this. Yeah, okay. We might need to center the whole block when we're done. So let's grab, actually let me peek in here to see what the created by text is. Okay, 36.40 tracking. Let me duplicate Adam Sandler. Oops, we need to trim Adam Sandler or move Adam Sandler. I'm going to hit left bracket to move his layers in point to my current time indicator. And I'm going to duplicate. I'm going to drag up here. What did we say? 32, 36. Let's try 36. Half the size. Double click the T icon on the text layer and say created by. Hit enter. Okay, that's looking pretty good. And I think I said 40% tracking. 40 pixels, rather. There we go. That's pretty good. Let's nudge that down a bit. And I think I'm going to take both of these things and nudge them down just slightly so it's a little bit more centered. Okay, that's good. Now, created by is actually going to present itself on screen a little bit sooner than Adam Sandler does. So there we go. Now let's just use a simple write-on effect for the created by. Flip down the text layers twirly. Let's go to animate, and we're just going to do opacity. We're going to do that X-Files write-on effect. Slide text opacity down to 0%. Change our smoothness under the advanced drop down twirly to 0. Flip that back up. And I happen to know this effect requires us to keyframe the start property. Let's keyframe the start property from 0% and over maybe 20 frames. Let's scrub that up to 100%, which will give us the write-on effect that we're looking for. Okay. Now Adam Sandler, if we look at our example, his name writes on with a little bit of some upward movement, which would mean position as well as opacity. See that? How each letter rises up just a bit. Okay. Let's see, we're down here on Adam Sandler. Let's hit U on this so we only have to look at the keyframes. Let's go to the start of Adam Sandler and let's flip down Adam Sandler's twirly, and let's animate opacity and then add a position property because we're going to need to position him lower at the start and he's going to tween up to the default position. Okay. Now there are 2 fields after position, text effect position and transform position, but we're just talking about this one right now, X and Y. Y is the vertical. So I'm going to move him down about, I don't know, 25 pixels, and I'm going to change my opacity to 0. So the effect is lower transparent text. So therefore, when I pull away the range selector, like that, my letters are going to fade in and raise up just a little bit. Because the action, the animation in text animation with range selectors happens when you remove the range selector. And the tweening that happens between the effect and the non-affected text is what gives you that movement. So let's lay down the start keyframe and let's take a full second to animate this on. So let's go up to 100%. Let's hit U on Adam Sandler's layer. And all right, looking pretty good. Let's set my work area here to right after Adam Sandler writes himself on. Let's hit letter N to set our work area. And let's hit preview, RAM preview, to see what we've got so far. Okay, looks pretty good. It's actually running a little bit slower. You can see up here that it's not running at full real time. It's in red, probably because I'm doing a screencast at the same time. Let's see. It kind of looked like the wipe on was a little bit slow. Just gonna see how long these are. Yeah, see that's 20 frames. Let's go back to ours and let's measure. I think we did a full second, didn't we? Yeah, okay. So let's grab the second keyframe of all, let's see, all three of our actor names. Let's grab that second keyframe and let's move all of those keyframes 10 frames to the left, so they will all only be 20 frames long. And the easiest way for me to do that, to move a keyframe, Option right and left arrow keys moves keyframes. Shift Option right and left arrow keys moves keyframes 10 frames. So Option Shift left arrow is going to move all of those 10 frames, which means that their wipe on is going to be that much faster, 10 frames faster, which we will love. Okay, Adam Sandler should probably only stay on screen for 3 seconds, maybe, before we fade him off. Actually, let's just trim both created by and Adam Sandler right at this point on our timeline. And let's add an opacity keyframe at the end, and then go back 10 frames, Command Shift left arrow, add another opacity keyframe. There we go. Jump back to the end and type in 0. Since I have both of them, both my layers selected, if I type in 0 on one of them, they will both be set to 0. And so created by Adam Sandler will fade off just like that. And now we need a directed by J.J. Abrams. So what we'll do is just duplicate these two layers, have the directed by start about right there. Let's zoom in a little bit by hitting plus on our keyboard. All right, let's change created by, here, scrub a little bit forward. Let's change created by to directed by. And change Adam Sandler to J.J. Abrams. Can't wait to see what J.J. Abrams does with our film, as well as Star Wars, really. Does he use periods in his name? Let's put periods. It looks a little more formal. Okay, so exact same animation for both of those. So we're done with J.J. Abrams. Fade out. Wait a second or two. All right, what do we have next? This is where, after the direction credit comes up, this is where we fade in our Venice movie. Right after J.J. Abrams, we have, let's see, yeah, not that long. So let's grab our Venice movie, Venice Rialto Bridge. Hit left bracket to align it right there. Let's lay down a opacity keyframe, opacity, Option T. Let's have it fade in over 20 frames. Let's go back to that first frame and set its opacity to 0. I like to set both keyframes first and then change the values. You might be different, but what that gives us is essentially a fade in. Okay. All right, let's see. What are we missing? After the movie fades in, we wait. You know what? I think this fade in, how long does this fade in take? Yeah, we take a full second to fade in our video. It's usually better to fade video in a little bit slower. for a little bit more cinematic effect. So after it's faded in for about a half second, our text comes up. The Grand Canal, Venice, Italy. And that is 50 and 42 point text. All right, so let's move, again, let's take our second keyframe here. Let's hit Option, Shift, right arrow, move that out 10 frames so that it is a total of 1 second. There's 10, 20, 30 frames, that's 1 second. Okay. Maybe about a half second later, our text should come up. The Grand Canal. Okay, a couple things we need to change here. Let's hit Enter. Let's go to paragraph and let's align left our text. Let's go back to character. Let's change the color to white. What did I say? 50 pixels was our type size. Let's bring this down here. So that's size 50. The subtext underneath that says Venice, Italy. Let's hit Command D to get another line. Let's double click the text icon. Venice, Italy. That was a 42 point. 42. I'll bump that up a little bit. Let's grab our black arrow. By the way, the hotkey I keep using for black arrow is V, just like in Illustrator. Okay, both of those things together. What do you think? Does that look pretty good? Let's go back to our movie, and how does the white text, does it fade in or does it write in? I can't remember. It writes on. Okay, so both of these things, I'm going to show you a little trick here. The Grand Canal, let's just do it one more time. Let's flip down the text twirly. Let's animate opacity. Let's flip down range selector. Let's keyframe start. Sorry, opacity needs to be 0 before we do anything. Flip down start. Let's take let's take a full second to have that right on. Maybe just 20 frames. And scrub that up to 100%. Let's turn off smoothness so it looks like it's being typed on. Smoothness is under the advanced twirly. So smoothness is at 0. Range selector 1 is now set. Let's hit U to collapse that layer. Okay, Grand Canal is now writing on. Okay, if I have that the way that I want it, and I just want to apply the exact same effect to the words Venice, Italy, which is exactly what we're going to do, I can just copy the animator. Let's close that up. I can copy the animator here, Command C, and I can go back up to Venice, Italy, make sure I'm at the beginning of Venice, Italy's layer by hitting I for endpoint, and I can paste Command V. If I go down here, I can see that I have pasted the same exact animator with the same keyframes under range selector. Everything is set the same way. Pretty easy way to copy and paste an effect. Now, I don't want it to start writing at the same exact time as the Grand Canal. I want to shift it right after the Grand Canal has typed on. I want Venice to come up. So, there we go. Grand Canal, Venice, Italy comes up. Let's select all layers, hit U to reveal keyframes, or we can just hit U one more time to hide keyframes. That'll allow us to see all of our movies here. And let's have it just remain on screen for a few seconds, maybe 4 seconds, and then let's fade everything out. Now we could apply a transparency or an opacity keyframe to all 3 layers and have them all fade out, but sometimes that gives us odd effects. Not everything fades out at the same rate, so what I like to do is make a solid layer. I like to make a black solid layer and just fade it up, so it's essentially slowly covering everything. And a solid layer is just a big rectangle that you can colorize. Layer, new, solid. I'm going to click the color box here, make it pure black. After Effects names its color itself. By default, it is the size of the comp, which is what we want. If not, you can click Make Comp Size and click OK. There is our layer solid. I'm going to move this to my current time by hitting left bracket, and I'm going to lay down an opacity keyframe, Option T. 1, 2, 3 gives us 1 full second. I'm going to type, add another keyframe there. Go back to the first keyframe, type in 0. So our two keyframes fade from 0 to 100%, which gives us a smooth, even fade to black at the end. Okay, very good. That is our animation. Now we need to add the sound. Let's go back to the beginning. Let's drag in ominous music. Let's have that start at the beginning. Let's hit LL on our audio layer. LL will reveal the waveform. Okay, it does start right at the beginning. I'm going to hit L to hide that. And our Italian guitar needs to fade in right at the time that Venice fades in. Maybe a little bit before, so let's add it right there. And let's talk about how we're going to fade in the music. We don't need to fade it in the beginning because the song automatically fades in, but let's talk about how these two audio layers are going to fade in and out. I'm going to hit L, which is going to reveal audio levels, which is a keyframeable property on audio layers. I'm going to zoom in by hitting plus. I'm going to hold down the space bar so I can scroll easily. That's why you're seeing the white cartoon gloved hand. And let's start with Italian guitar mandolin. Hit I to get to the beginning of this. And let's lay down a keyframe at 0. If you know about audio, you know that 0 decibels is sort of normal audio level. Let's jump 10 frames, 1, 2, 3 times. You know what, let's fade in the audio. Let's take a little bit longer, maybe 50 frames to fade in. Put a keyframe there. So the second keyframe has a value of 0. They both have a value of 0, but we want the second one to stay at 0. I'm going to jump back to the first one, and I'm going to take it all the way down as far as I can, which in After Effects is -48, which is pretty much no sound. And then I'm going to come down here because I need to fade out the ominous music and leave room for Italian music. So let's put a level, Option L, a level keyframe right there. Jump to the second one, and let's scrub this down to -48. Now probably what we want to happen is not to have these right on top of each other, but to have the ominous music fade out a little bit sooner. So I'm going to slide this a little bit to the left so that fade starts sooner, and then I can trim this layer, Option right bracket, so that I don't like having layers just linger on throughout my whole project if I'm not using them. So I'm going to trim that right there. Let's do an audio preview. I'm going to hit Control period on my laptop keyboard to just get an audio preview. Alright, that's pretty good. Audio in this latest version of After Effects, audio preview and audio during RAM preview doesn't work super great, but I'm going to pause the recording right now and just see how our project looks and how it's working. Because if there are any errors, I want to correct that with you. Okay, my RAM preview worked, so it looks like we're done. And this has been probably the longest tutorial I've ever made, so I'm going to leave you to it, leave you to the creation, and we'll see you in class. Thanks. Bye.